publishers always had hesitations for publishing an existentialist writer, as they call me, from Turkey, who writes in poetic prose. And I'm very thankful also to Megaron for this night, and to you as well. It was lovely to hear myself in Greek, and I could hear my own rhythm, in fact. I'm so sorry that only 2 of my books are currently in Greek. My very first I wrote as a 25-year-old novice writer, and my essays, which are written for a journal, so I can't do my poetic prose as much as I want to in the newspaper. I started newspaper writing only for economic reasons, and I did it only for 5 years, but somehow it eclipsed all my other writing eventually. Maybe there's some irony in that, but I always took it very, very seriously, writing in a newspaper. I tried to make it as literary as possible, to use all the techniques I knew as a writer of literature, to bring out the silent voices of those who cannot tell their own story, the voice of the victim. Of course, in a newspaper, your time is limited. You can't always produce perfect literature. It has to be there by 12 o'clock. But also you have another responsibility, that you are talking about real people. And some of the people I have written about are dead. And their families will read these articles. Perhaps the policeman who killed them will read those articles. And I wanted always to talk to all of them. And I thought if I could perfectly write about torture, maybe the policeman will cry and will never do it again. Very naive approach, of course. And if you read these articles, you can't possibly understand why this woman has been put to jail, but also with facing a life sentence. What can it be in those articles? So much outraging, so much. There is not much. This is just a little mirror to Turkish society today and in the past. And I think when they don't like the image in the mirror, they just try to break the mirror apart. And maybe what makes them so angry, perhaps somewhere they feel these are articles without any compromise. You don't have to write about torture or atrocities or concentration camps, themes that I chose to write about. But if you do, you have to do it without compromise. You can't be hypocritical, you can't have too much mercy on yourself, on the language, or on the reader. Everything has to go beyond the borders. And this no-compromise point is probably what they feel in these essays, but it is not my personal strength or courage. It is the strength and courage of literature. Literature becomes literature when it passes those points. So I started at random. I had actually prepared another speech, which started with the phrase, human and being. English language puts these words so naturally together to form one of the most inaccessible phrases of all, the human being. Although every one of us naturally feels to belong to that category, almost no one is completely satisfied or fully content to be called only such. Just a human being. We need many other identities beyond that phrase. Only in prison or in war, in such extreme conditions, you can hear people saying, I want to remain a human being. In fact, there is an irresistible call in this phrase, this very old-fashioned phrase, human being. And as we all know, human being makes tools. He or she builds, organizes, creates, and destroys. And as we all know, the human being tells stories. Our complicated grammar structure allows us to be a narrator. And we want to narrate and to listen to our own story. And we do it in all possible ways and forms, with representations, symbols, images. And since when, is a question actually I asked in my novel, The City in Crimson Cloak. Probably since the time we realized our own mortality. And the oldest myths tell us about this great mistake. Someone somewhere made a great mistake. Somebody fell asleep and lost the plant of immortality to the snake, as in Gilgamesh. Or someone ate a poisonous apple of knowledge, and hence started our exile in the narration, in our own narration. First was the word, started the sacred text. But with that word also, the sky separated from the earth, the face was separated, torn apart from its own image. And since the time we know ourselves, as we invented self, we are created from this union, the marriage of blood and dreams. As the word itself is, it is created from the marriage of fire and ashes, darkness and void, and blood and dreams. As writers, it's our job or cause or the reason for our existence is to find the meanings of words, and to find words for the meaning. It's our job or the reason of our existence to tell the human story, the tragic human story, and to look at the dilemma in this phrase, the human being. And we have to tell the story simultaneously, both as an object and a subject. And everyone's story, I deeply believe, relates to everyone else's story and belongs to everyone else. Everything we look at, or everyone we look at, we see our own image. But our own image can be visible only through the full picture, the full reality. And each story, the better it's told, I think, again, approaches an anonymous myth. But each myth becomes a story when it's turned into an individual story, and it finds some meaning. And before I went into prison, for me there were some words like, I of course had great respect for them, but I didn't know their meaning, like solidarity, like dignity. They sounded and echoed very nicely in my ears, but in prison it's a full-blooded reality. And these words are filled with blood of centuries, blood of thousands of people. And in prison you can't survive without solidarity of other prisoners or outsiders. And you learn dignity when you are faced with a life sentence, but you just can't step back from a word. And you don't do it for the sake of resisting, but when you look back, for that sake of word, you have simply resisted. And again, in jail, I realized that it started to learn the meaning of my sentences, like I had written actually before going to jail. Freedom is a word that is never silenced. And now I know probably much less about freedom, but I know more about captivity. I can form much less sentences about justice, but I know injustice. And in prison, when I was still alive, but in a way so far away from life, or whatever I knew as life, I had to start from all over, from scratch, searching for paths that will take me back to life. And I learned it also from other prisoners. Some people grow plants in a cell which there is no earth. Some read, some write, some tell stories, some make music, some draw pictures. And you do everything possible to find some image that you can recognize your own face among those stone and barbed wire. And then I could realize, I could understand much more that once, I don't know his name, sorry now, and I couldn't check it in the hotel, but an Auschwitz prisoner, an artist, who survived the camp only by painting horses. And very, very beautiful horses. But if you look at them very carefully, you see the torment of those curves and lines, and in that beauty is hidden such deep pain, almost unbearable pain. And the people wrote in the camps, even in pieces of toilet paper, that was so valuable in the camp, but they chose to use it for a few sentences that there was no guarantee it will sneak out, or to make pictures on that toilet paper. And these things I had read about, I had listened to, I had read human dignity, human creation. But when I went to jail, I realized that there is some essential truth in these stories, that something about human beings, something very, very sacred. And I must also mention Bruno Schulz, who is one of my favorite writers, and who wrote his last novel in a ghetto. And I searched for his grave all the way from Istanbul, for his birthplace, because his grave is, nobody knows, he doesn't have a grave. And I couldn't find it because I searched it in Poland. Apparently the town he was born is now in Ukraine. And Bruno Schulz was a Jewish writer, and he was killed in a ghetto by a soldier. And I said, there is something indefeatable. If I get out of Istanbul 70 years later and look for Bruno Schulz's birthplace, there it is. No, there were people who could just, with one order, kill millions of Bruno Schulzes, but nobody searches their birth town. But I go 70 years later and look for this man's birthplace. But also, I look for, or I know that I will never find it, the missing novel of Bruno Schulz. That novel written in the ghetto, Messiah, the Messiah. And it's forever taken from me. As the reader of Bruno Schulz, I feel a great injustice, unfairness, that novel was stolen from me forever. No one else can write it. Even perhaps Bruno Schulz was alive, he could not write it again. And that is forever gone. And I must again also refer to my book that's not in Greek, The Stone Building. It's about a prison or a police station, metaphorical place of captivity and eternal night. And among those prisoners there is an angel my book and I looked for the angel. I found her. I found him, actually. And this angel's face is divided into two unequal parts with a scar. And he brings presents. He or she. Turkish doesn't differentiate he or she, so sexless angel. I portray him more as a man. He brings presents to all the prisoners. To some he brings the sound of the wind, to some a childhood memory, to some the sound of the sea, to the others the smell of the sea. But no one gets the full package, and no one actually has the full image of the angel. Some hear a sound, some hear a whisper, some feel a smell. Even on that they can't agree. Does he smell like an animal, or does he smell like flowers? And at the end of the night will of course eventually end, the night of the torture, there will be survivors. But one will not come out of that night, one will not come out of that trauma or prison or torture. One is forever gone. We can interpret it as the angel is gone, or the dead, the suicider. But the others, the survivors, they say, if we could tell our complete story, we could have perhaps saved the angel, but perhaps we could not have. Perhaps something is gone forever. But whatever is left from that angel, in fact there's a madman in the story whose face is also scarred into two unequal parts. He hears the best is a tune, is a melody, a song. And the angel has dropped that tune and he has quoted. But to be able to hear the tune, he has to go back to the stone building outside. He can't hear it among the human beings. And I finished the book by saying, this is a tune that rises higher and higher with each human heart it encounters, only to be lost in the horizon, in the infinity, from whom no one has returned yet. And when I, as a writer, try to sing the tune, I'm always out of tune. I hear it, but I can't sing it perfectly. And I think this is the miracle of the word, that it is never, in fact, completed. It is never perfectly said. It is never itself, actually. And I want to also, in my notes, have written that I should talk about Cizre. Cizre is a small town where horrible atrocities took place in 2015. And in 2015 I was aware outside Turkey. So I returned almost like a foreigner, beginning of 2016. So my heart hadn't hardened like those who were watching the events daily. And I watched a documentary in a theater like this among hundreds of people. And in this documentary there was one scene which I could never erase from my eyes. Among the ruins, surrounded building, the police said, don't come out with a white flag. Those who are not fighting, the civilians, come out with your white flags. And among the ruins came out a group of people, only old men, old women and children, with a little cart carrying their last belongings and waving frantically their white flags. 10 seconds, they shut them off. And when I saw this scene, I knew I would write about Israel. This is the one article that I think put me to jail. And I walked home under the rain, already followed by police, and the sound of the rain was just like the sound of the machine guns. And I wrote the article, this is called Your Father. This is Your Father. And I borrowed the technique from Heinrich Becker, an Austrian poet who dedicated all his life to write about concentration camps and Holocaust, to find a technique to write poetry about camps. How you can write poetry after Auschwitz was a question to Heinrich Becker and to me too. And I guess I wrote a heavy article, otherwise I wouldn't be in jail. That I know for sure. And while I was in jail, a magazine made a special issue on me. I was their previous writer, and there was a little article, interviews with the people of Israel. Those people have lost their town, they have lost many people, they have lost almost everything. But still they talked as frankly as they could in the interview, and they said, we have never read Asli Erdogan. We have only heard she's in jail because she wrote about us. And we will never forget her. Even if the whole world forgets her, we will not. And this is the best compliment I've ever heard in my whole writing career. And this means to me that literature has a meaning. After all, it's not for fame or Nobel Prize or this or that or for that ivory tower. And honestly, I know many people get angry at me when I say this, but I do believe it's the easier part, to find perfect structures, perfect metaphors, perfect images. I believe it's much easier than to sometimes say the simple truth of the tragedy of being human. And very rarely I believe that, for there are some moments that I speak to you, you hear me. These are rare moments. You speak to me and I hear you. But these are all what we believe in. And as a writer, I have to keep my belief alive in this communication and in the power of the word as resilience and resurrection. And I will just read some short passage I had written and finish. I keep looking down, sorry, because these lights give me migraine, that's why I'm not reading actually, I'm talking, but it looks like I'm reading, because I can't raise my eyes. Now I will read them. Literature, as a mirror, has long been shattered, but some of us still keep on groping among the broken glass, wandering through the dreams of a mirror, perhaps that has long turned into sand. For a grain of truth, only a bleeding hand can grasp. But the miracle of the word is eternal, and it lies in the fact that it forever remains incomplete. I have dedicated a lifetime of writing to voice the wound, the void, and the victim. And now I myself am a victim. I'm painfully aware of that. Without the silent screams of the victim and those within us too, I believe our word, hence our world, will be even more devoid of meaning. Thank you very much.